Dr. Melanie Braithwaite tutted and gently adjusted the focus on the eyepieces of her microscope, sharpening the image of the primordial single-cell organisms floating on the slide. "Dave, how deep did you say these samples were taken?" she asked, not bothering to look up. 2.5 kilometers, replied Dave Baskins, shifting his weight in the chair and pushing himself over to her desk. "Think you've got something interesting?" "Maybe," she nodded to the microscope while moving away from her desk. "Take a look." Dave was in his late 40s and seriously overweight. As he studied the sample, she caught his musty scent. It wasn't too offensive, a not-so-subtle blend of body odour, tobacco and beer. He'd probably been wearing the same clothes for a month, which was normal for Antarctica. The first thing Melanie noticed when she arrived at the base was how personal hygiene wasn't a top priority for the men, and some of the women were only marginally better. Spending 9 months cooped up in a glorified tin can with nothing but ice and snow for a view did things to people psychologically. Some withdrew, while others became more extrovert, the isolation magnifying their underlying idiosyncrasies. Melanie thought it would make a great study for a Mars mission. She'd been analysing glacial cores as part of the British Antarctic Survey, one of a number of scientific research teams stationed on the vast subcontinent of the South Pole. As a researcher, her role was to scrutinise the sedimentary layers buried deep in the ice for the last 800,000 years. It was a microbiologist's dream. Examining the ice cores was like looking back through the strata of millennia to some of the earliest forms of life on the planet. She was searching for rare species of single-celled bacteria and microalgae in the hope of understanding what had triggered the explosion of life in the Cambrian period. What made it even more attractive was the fact she was 5,000 miles from London. "Coccomixa subellipsoidea," Dave murmured, sitting back in his chair. "Green algae." 10-million-year-old green algae, she corrected him. "And still capable of photosynthesis." "Resilient little buggers, I'll grant you that, but not going to win us any prizes back home. We need something juicy like an ancient strain of Arthrobacter. Chief McCready says they're going to take one last shot at reaching Lake Vostok this week." He pushed himself back on his desk. Officially, Dave was the lead microbiologist on the project and her superior, but they both knew she outranked him in terms of experience and qualifications. Their project director, Professor Richardson, had made a point of questioning her about it during her interview for the posting. Melanie was clearly overqualified for the role, but her work at Imperial College and her medical training made her too useful to reject. The professor knew better than to ask what personal reasons could make her choose to spend the next 9 months in one of the most inhospitable places on Earth. "We've got enough samples to keep us busy for the next 10 years. Why does the chief think we need to go deeper?" Dave shrugged, closing his laptop. "Because he wants to go deeper. It's not every day you get to drill into a subglacial lake that's been sealed for at least 30 million years. Melanie scoffed, tying her hair back in a ponytail and getting up from her desk. "Sounds like a recipe for disaster. The last thing we need is to release some ancient superbug that's been safely locked away in the ice." "You've seen too many movies," he said, checking his watch. "On that note, it's definitely time for a drink." Opening the door to a large freezer unit, Melanie pulled out another slice of ice and dropped it into a Petri dish. "You go ahead, I just want to check one more sample." Dave knew better than to argue. He always asked, and she always made an excuse not to join them. It was 5 o'clock and nearing the end of the Antarctic summer. The rec room would be full of drilling crew and ops teams celebrating the end of their time on the base. In 3 days, they would have to start packing up their work and closing down the station for winter. Unlike the others, Melanie wasn't looking forward to the flight back to civilization.